And with that, the year 2024 comes to a close. What's happening, guys? Back at you with another video. So we had a very interesting year when it comes to movies for the year of 2024. We had a lot of great movies, some other movies that weren't so great. But in this video, I'm going to be bringing together a list for y'all, and this is going to be the most surprising movies of 2024. These are basically movies that ended up surprising me, or to where I wasn't really expecting much out of them, and they turned out being great, or they turned out that I actually ended up liking them. So this is just going to be a list of some of the movies that actually surprised me in the year of 2024. The time has come to where I'm going to be doing all of the 2024 end of the year movie videos. So besides having this video of the most surprising movies of 2024, I'll also be doing a video for most disappointing movies of 2024. Of course, the best movies of 2024, some of my favorite movies and guilty pleasures of 2024. So be on the lookout for those videos. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this list. Kicking off the list is going to be the movie Challengers. Now, going off the trailer, when I saw this trailer, it looked like it was going to, center around tennis and this whole love triangle going on between Zendaya and some of the other characters in this movie. And really, just watching the trailer, it seemed like this movie wasn't really going to be for me. So I didn't really check this out theaters. But when it hit streaming, I checked it out a couple weeks ago finally. And I gotta say, I was really surprised with this movie. I was surprised. The thing that surprised me with this movie is, like, it was actually kind of good. I heard a little buzz about it, but it kind of died out fairly quickly. But I was just really surprised on how good this movie actually was, and how much I really ended up liking this movie. This was actually one of the few movies this year to where I actually watched more than once. And really, when I said I watched this movie a couple weeks ago on streaming, and I actually recommended this movie to somebody else to watch it, and I ended up watching it with them a couple days later. And I didn't even mind watching it again, even though I watched it just a couple days ahead of time. And it was just really interesting movie. It's intense, it's kind of intriguing, the way that it is, the sleekness of this movie, the way that we get some of these stylized shots in here. The camera work is kind of immaculate in a way, the way that it's very interesting. There's very intriguing and stylized shots that we got with the camera work in this movie, to where there's even some shots where it looked like you're in the perspective of the ball, the point of view of the actual tennis ball going back and forth on the court, being hit by rackets and all that. And just the way that the use of camera work was in here is very stylized. It's the sleekness of it. It was very intriguing the way that the camera work was done in here. And the score was honestly pretty amazing. It's sort of like a EDM sort of type of score, and it just flowed so eloquently along in the movie, and then it really goes to show, just a couple of days ago, we had the Golden Globes, and it won for Best Score. Challengers won for Best Score at the Golden Globes. And honestly, I was actually kind of rooting for at the Golden Globes, and, it actually won. So that just goes to show you the score of this movie was honestly just the way it just flows within the movie, and just giving this story with these characters, to where, like I was saying, it definitely is revolved around tennis. Like, it centers on tennis, but it also centers on this sort of makeshift love triangle going on in the movie. And it's just the way that it's intriguing, and the way that you're just like glued to the screen, and just makes you on your edge of your seat. The way that this is, it's like, in a way, it's suspenseful, and then it's thrilling in a way. And then you have this whole match going on between the two characters in the movie, this whole tennis match going on, and just the way that they use the flashbacks, the way that they intertwine them within the story and all that, and just telling the story overall. It was a very intriguing movie. I actually ended up liking it. But another movie that I did not really expect anything from is going to be Transformers 1. Now, I did check this one out on streaming a couple weeks ago also, when it hit streaming. And really, I was just surprised with this movie, And I gotta say, the biggest thing about this movie was the marketing behind this movie. The marketing was so terribly done for this movie. It did not do the movie any justice. The way that we got some of the trailers, I really only checked out one trailer, really. The trailer made this movie seem like it was a little too kiddish for my taste. So that's why I really didn't go check it out in theaters, because it just seemed like it was going to gear towards kids a little bit more. So I really wasn't expecting much out of this movie. But I did check it out on streaming because I was hearing, a little buzz about this movie. So I decided to go and check it out. And I gotta say, I was totally surprised by this movie. I did not expect this movie to actually be somewhat entertaining and actually have a good story. Basically, we're getting like an origin story between the friendship and the fall of Optimus Prime and Megatron. And that's just an interesting concept to be able to give us that origin story, like show us their friendship, but also show us the decline and fall between them to where they will, eventually become rivals and on opposite ends, opposite sides of this whole, Transformers world. It's a very interesting concept, and they were able to execute this concept pretty well, I gotta say. The way that it is, it's kind of kiddie at times, but they elevated it to where it was actually kind of entertaining for adults, and to be able to like just have some dark elements that go on in here. Not super dark, but they're dark enough for kids in the sense to where adults can be able to be a little intrigued by it. To be able to see these two characters on screen, Optimus Prime the way he was when he was younger, before he becomes a leader of the Autobots, and to be able to see the rise and fall of Megatron and see his descent into the so quote unquote dark side of being the leader of the Decepticons and all that, and just the way that you're able to see him turn, the way the things that it takes to push somebody over the edge to be able to go down that path. And it was a very interesting concept. It was a very interesting story going on, honestly. And I was just surprised overall that this actually turned out to be a movie that I actually enjoyed my time with. And we have Carry On. This is a Netflix exclusive movie. And just really the surprise with this movie was that with it being a Netflix movie, and I checked it out, I heard a little buzz about it and decided to go and check it out. And just really the surprising thing was about this movie was that with it being a Netflix exclusive movie, I wasn't really expecting much, and it actually turned out to be quite something. Like, it actually turned out to be a quite solid movie, I gotta say. Just the way that the intrigue and thrills and suspense was in this movie, to be able to see Jason Bateman actually, reverse role, like turn on this, be in this role, and it's not really something you expect him to do. You're used to kind of seeing him be more into comedic roles, so this was kind of a different turn for him when it comes to playing this character, and just the things that he was able to do with this role. It was very intriguing and interesting during the time of watching this movie. But overall, just the way this movie plays out, it's sort of like a terrorist attack going on in this airport. You have Taron Egerton, who's playing this character who's trying to, he's trying to follow the commands of Jason Bateman, but he's, trying to save himself, trying to save everybody in the airport at the same time also. So it's very intriguing and suspenseful the way that everything plays out, because, you don't know exactly how things are going to play out. And it's very intriguing and interesting in that way. So really the surprise with this movie was that it just turned out to be a great, solid little flick that wasn't really expecting much from it. But, upon hearing a little buzz about it, decided to check it out. Was surprised that with it being a Netflix movie, exclusive movie, was surprised that it actually turned out to be a solid watch. And we get to the substance. The substance was one hell of a surprise this year. I heard some buzz about this movie going on, so I decided to check it out a couple weeks ago on streaming. And I gotta say, wow, this movie was one hell of a ride. It was one hell of a surprise. This was one of those movies I gotta say I was most surprised by this year. Demi Moore gives one hell of a performance in this movie. The way this movie plays out to where it just goes, it's kind of a social commentary on society, the way that society is, the beauty, the way that they hold high regards to beauty and being young. And the way that you have this character that's played by Demi Moore to where she's, in her older ages and she's being replaced by a younger actress. And, just the way that you see Demi Moore play this role. And, props to Margaret Qualley as well in this movie. But the way that you see Demi Moore play this role and, dealing with being replaced, dealing with not being that young, beautiful, Demi Moore is beautiful in this movie, of course, but not as far as society is concerned, as far as with the way people see her now in this movie, the way that they show her play this role to where, people think she's too old, that she's not up to the beauty standards that they want, and so they go after somebody younger. So the way that Demi Moore plays this role is so amazing. And it goes to show, she just won a Golden Globe for this role. So props to her, man. I gotta say, not necessarily she surprised me, but this movie surprised me with the way it was, and just the way that this movie, it plays out sort of like a body horror movie in a way also, where a lot of scenes are very horrific and grotesque also. It's kind of unsettling at times. Just the way that this movie was is just one hell of a ride. It's so surprising in that aspect. This turned out to be a great way to, end the year off and check out this movie. It was just one hell of a surprising movie, I gotta say. And we get into Wicked. When it comes to Wicked, I wasn't really expecting much from this movie. Honestly, the surprise is that I ended up liking this movie, or like, ended up liking anything from this movie, because I really wasn't expecting much from this movie. I wasn't really expecting to like anything from this movie. The only thing that really got me to go and watch this movie was that I do like the Wizard of Oz, the original Wizard of Oz movie, but I really wasn't. This movie really wasn't like on my highly anticipated list or anything like that. Of course, I've heard of the Broadway play of this movie, and we had Ariana Grande, Cynthia Erivo in this movie, and it was just like it didn't really quite capture that highly anticipation for me when it comes to the movies of the year. But I decided to go ahead and check it out. Heard a little buzz about it, of course, being it was actually turned out to be good, and I was just surprised overall with that. I ended up liking anything from this movie, because I wasn't even really expecting to like anything from this movie, and for the most part, the way the production value is in this movie, the way the performances are, the actors, everything was honestly pretty well done. I will say, of course, if y'all recently saw my review of this movie that I did when the movie came out, it might seem like I was a little harsh on that movie when I was doing my review, but when it comes down to it, I think this movie is great in its own right. I will say, of course, the only thing that, like I said in my review, the only thing I really didn't like about this movie was the actual songs themselves. And I'm not talking about the performances of the song, I'm just talking about the actual songs. I couldn't really get into the songs themselves, aside from Defying Gravity. Defying Gravity moments towards the end of the movie was an amazing scene going on. The way that Cynthia Erivo performs that role, performs the character of Elphaba, and performs Defying Gravity scene. Amazing, I gotta say. Ariana Grande is great. The rest of the cast is great in here too. So the surprising aspect of this movie was that I ended up liking anything from this movie. So we get to Inside Out 2, and the surprising thing about this movie was that it ended up being a good Pixar movie. Now, I've seen the original Inside Out movie, and I think that's a fine movie. It's a good movie within its own right, but I haven't really watched that movie. I only seen it once, and I haven't watched it since it first came out back in, what was it, 2015, 2016, something like that. And I never really had the urge to go back and rewatch that first movie, but I did rewatch it right before I watched the second movie. I ended up watching Inside Out 2 on streaming. I waited till streaming. I didn't really check this out in theaters. Decided to go ahead and wait till streaming and see how it was. But it was a nice 1-2 punch when I watched the first movie of Inside Out, and then right after I watched Inside Out 2. So it's a nice 1-2 punch going on there. And I gotta say, it was a surprising factor that I ended up actually enjoying this movie. The way that this movie plays out, it's a nice little story going on. Basically, Riley is now in her teenager years, and y'all all know what it's like to be a teenager, being able to deal with hormones, going through that whole side of teenage years, dealing with new emotions. Is, for example, the way they play out the story in here, where she's dealing with newer emotions, like, for example, anxiety and a couple other emotions going on, and just the way that everything plays out in this story is it's very interesting. It's interesting, it's good, and just deals with that teenager aspect, and it tells a great story of being able to kind of relive those teenager years. You flash back to how you were as a teenager, and you kind of relive those years while watching this movie, and you get to see that. But you see it in the form of the way that Pixar does it. They're telling a story of inner emotions that are like somewhat personified and being alive in a way inside your head or whatever, and just interesting story going on, with Riley in her teenager years and being a teenager in general and all. So I was really surprised that I ended up actually enjoying my time with this movie, and it actually turned out to be a great Pixar movie. Now we get into Twisters, and really wasn't expecting much from this movie. I did check it out on streaming. I didn't really check it out in theaters. But I wasn't really expecting much from this movie. Disaster film. I don't typically watch too many disaster films and don't really get into them too much. But this actually turned out to be just a overall fun time. You got Glenn Powell, who's a likable, charismatic actor, and the rest of the cast is great in here. Also, you got David Cornsweet, pre-Superman, who's really a big jerk in this movie. But honestly, just the adventure, the action-adventure type of way this movie is. It's suspenseful in a way. It's kind of thrilling the way that they, these storm chasers go out and try to, basically go after these tornadoes, and just the way this movie is just a fun disaster type of movie. Just had fun time with it, enjoying the movie, and really just the surprise of it. that I actually ended up just liking it and having a fun time with it. And we have Super Slash Man, the Christopher Reeve story. This is a documentary based on Christopher Reeves. And really, the surprising factor with this movie was that I just wasn't ready to feel those emotions with this documentary, with this movie. I wasn't expecting to feel the kind of emotions I felt while watching this, the way that it just basically tells a sort of life story of Christopher Reeves, the way that he was while playing Superman, after, you know, the way he was before his accident, after his accident, and just everything that plays out that way. Just emotional roller coaster going on while watching this documentary. And it just really goes to show, like, you know, I watched the Christopher Reeve Superman movies basically for the first time fully about 2 years ago. And I just remember coming out of those movies and thinking to myself, like, wow, I see why people regard him as, you know, the best definitive Superman. You know, I see it now. I see why people say that now. And I would agree with those people that he is definitely, when I imagine the Superman character, he is the definitive Superman when it comes down to it, to being able to capture the character of Clark Kent and Superman. I think he is the definitive one who does it the best of both worlds, really. And really, while watching this, you know, it's very interesting to see everything that goes on, the way that this documentary just plays out, and is just telling his sort of life story in a way. And I only ever knew of Christopher Reeves after his accident, just because the time I was born, I've only known him of, you know, after he had his accident. I never got to experience firsthand his Superman movies whenever they first came out. I'm trying to remember. I forget the year, the exact year that his accident happened. But basically, the accident, whenever it happened, I was already barely born, and you know, I've only known of Christopher Reeve as being confined to a chair, and whatever happened after the accident. You know, I didn't know any of that other stuff beforehand, or how exactly everything plays out. So it was very interesting to be able to see that aspect. And unfortunately, whenever he did pass away, I was still pretty young. So to be able to see this documentary and to be able to see just a new side of that, you know, to be able to be, you know, my age, be older, and to be able to actually watch this and see how it actually was, and see how everything plays out within his life during the accident, after the accident, and all that, and just ramps up those emotions while watching this. You know, honestly, I got choked up a little bit during while watching this, especially when it came to like showing Robin Williams in the actual documentary himself, and be able to showcase that friendship that they had. And I just got emotional and choked up during those times also while showing him. So overall, just being able to just be a surprise to where this documentary movie of sorts, whatever you want to call it, just the emotions I felt while watching this was really one of the surprising things about this. And we get into The Wild Robot. This was really a surprising movie to where I really wasn't expecting much from this movie. I didn't go into this movie with high expectations or anything like that. I just went into this movie with, you know, hearing a little buzz about it, saying like, oh, it's probably one of the best anime movies of the year. So really went into this movie, and this movie just has a great heartfelt story at its core. You know, a story about parenthood between like a pseudo mother and son in a way, and just tells this story that's heartfelt, you know, between, you know, the, you know, sort of parenthood and, you know, friendship and all that. And I just wasn't really expecting to actually end up liking this movie. I had a enjoyable time with this movie. It's very heartfelt, just ramps up those emotions going on, and really just, you know, any normal average person who has that relationship with a parent, or, you know, a friendship or anything like that, could really feel this story, could really feel for these characters and just everything that happened in this movie and the way that things play out. You know, it's found like just basically, honestly, just the way that everything was playing out, it's just a surprise to me that I ended up actually enjoying my time with this. And you had great voice acting all around in this movie, and just overall a great story going on. And I do believe it is definitely one of the best anime movies of the year. And we have Speak No Evil. With this movie, it was definitely kind of a surprise movie. I wasn't really expecting much from this movie. Didn't go into this movie with high expectations or anything like that. So really just popped this on one day, decided to check it out. You know, I was hearing some stuff about it, so a little buzz about it. So I decided to go and check it out and see what it was all about. And I gotta say, this was definitely a interesting watch. You know, it's suspenseful and thrilling at times. The way that James McAvoy is in this movie the way he's playing this role to where it's very creepy and unsettling. The way that everything plays out, all the events play out in this movie. The way that this movie just ends on a very interesting note, and just it's just the way everything plays out. It's interesting, intriguing, suspenseful, thrilling, all at the same time throughout this whole movie. You're just on the edge of your seat, wondering what's going to happen next, how are events going to play out, and all that. And it's just, honestly, that's the surprising aspect of this movie, to where I just actually enjoyed what they did with this movie. I know there's a remake, or I know this is basically a remake from a movie a couple years ago, and it was definitely an uproar. I remember hearing about the uproar about this movie before it came out, to where why they're remaking a movie that barely came out about 2-3 years ago or so. And remember hearing that uproar and stuff. And then after the movie came out, I started hearing a little buzz about it. And I was like, you know what? I might check this movie out once it's streaming. So after checking it out, I just got to say, honestly, it was surprising to where I actually kind of enjoyed it, and just overall enjoyed the movie. And it was just surprising in that way. But that is going to do it for the most surprising movies of 2024, at least for me, in my opinion. But let me know down in the comments below, was there any movies in 2024 that surprised you? Definitely like to hear your thoughts and comments about that. But that's going to do it all for this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe and turn notifications on so you know when I post another video. Hope you have an awesome day, and I'll see you on the next one.